This is Gemara and Moed Katan and Daf Yomi. So the learning should be a tremendous chos for Shlema for him. Shmuel Yos ben Yeveya ben Vega Chaim Basar Shalom Sibin Ezel Ser Maskanati Tabazim As Chaysa Yisrael Mendel as Verts of Shalei Sham As Amim Shavik Shechan Shmuel ben Tila Tinam Chan Rizim Chay Basmin Adin and Vision Mendes Viv Vegro Rivka Zashem and Atazum and Glas Amram Yaakov Tzar Baskila Shem Yisach Ben Esi Yehudes Rafal Avram and Rachel Odei Shim Shem Ben Chana Vigal Perabas Esther Miriam Aviela Bas Blumi Yisrael Yitzchak Ben Dina V'Soy Shar Chaydi Yisrael as well as Choshech V'Shachem Devar Shem Miriam As Yisrael Gittel Shanes Mordechai Mordechai Shenda Zitzika Bas Shendel Shema Ben Chaya Ofe Ben Tali Shema Ben Levi Zav Rachel Bastina. They should find the Zivug Hagain Bekarev, and finally this year should be a tremendous chos Ili Neshama for Michal Mordechai ben Yisrael Yitzchak HaKayin. We're holding on the very, very bottom of Ches Amid Beis. We're about to start a question on the last line, but in order to ask this question, we have to bring yourself back into things and just remind yourself of the din of the Mishnah that said in Ches Amid Beis, you cannot get married on Chol HaMoed because it's a Simcha. And the Gemara said, it's Simcha? You can't have Simcha on Chol HaMoed? And the Gemara had numerous answers. If you're looking at your screen, you'll see highlighted all the different answers, whether it's Ma'arvin Simcha, whether it's we're afraid you're not going to give Yontif the proper honor, whether it's Exer Zakasa, V'samachta Bechagecha, and not with your wife, whether it's because the Tircha preparing the meal, or whether it's because we're afraid of Bitzel Per V'Revya, you're not going to get married, and you're going to wait until Chol HaMoed. So after all these answers, says the Gemara in the final line, Meisvei, Kol Elu Sh'amru Asur Lisa B'Moed. Says the Rice, all of these women that you're not allowed to get married in a Chol HaMoed, as we turn over to Tessam and Aleph, but Mutarin, Lisa Erev Regel, but you're allowed to get married in Erev Yontif. Says the Gemara, Kasha Lekulu. Is a question on everyone. Let's look at the top Rashi. Top Rashi explains, Mutar li Erev Regel Kolaimar, Mutar lechatchila. You're allowed to do it. But what do you mean? It says Rashi, Vafal Gav, the Shivas Hayamim, Shel Suda Yeberegel. So when, according to all the different answers that we said, you're mixing Simcha LeSimcha, you're going to have the bother, you're rejoicing with your wife, all the different reasons. Why aren't we worried? Will apply to if you're getting married on Erev Yontif. Answers the Gemara like Kasha. It's not a question now, we're going to go through one by one. Leman, Damar Bisham Simcha. You can tell me that you're mixing two Simchas? No. Why not? Ikar Simcha Chad Yomu. The Ikar Simcha of a wedding is the first day, not all 7 days. Leman, Damar Bisham Tircha. Ikar Tircha Chad Yomu. The main bother is the Chasana Suda, which is Erev Shab, Erev Yontif, not Chol HaMoed. Leman, Damar Bisham Bittel Perav Rivya. According to Ban Dharma that says you're going to wait until Chol HaMoed to get married. Lechad Yoima Loimashi Inshi Navshei. You're not going to wait for 1 day, meaning if you have a full week of Chol HaMoed, so you'll wait. But if you're only going to have one potential day to get married, as Rashi points out 3 lines on the top, the only days in the Erev Regel, you're not going to wait until that day. Why? Because maybe something's going to come up. And now, according to the fourth answer, and that's how we answer up all the questions. Now we go back to the fundamental answers and we try to find sources. Says the Gemara, this concept that you're not allowed to mix two different simchas, Menalan, from where do we know this from? Says the Gemara, it says in the pasuk about Shlomo HaMelech, Shlomo Beis Ahi is a chag, and Shlomo HaMelech made a chag, made a celebration. This is the Chanukah's Beis HaMikdash. V'chol Yisrael Imo, the entire Klal Yisrael was with him. Kahal Gadol, the entire congregation Milavai Chamas ad Nachal Mitzrayim, from the place, the entrance of Chamas until Nachal Mitzrayim of Nei Hashem Elokeinu. And how long did they rejoice? Shivas Yamim v'Shivas Yamim, 7 days and 7 days. And the Gemara and the Brisa points out on the first white line, Arba Yom, which was 14 days. So ask the Gemara 1 second. And if you're going to tell me that you're allowed to mix two different simchas, then so why did he make 7 days of Chanukah's Abayis and then the 7 days of Sukkot? Why don't you just do the two together? Rather, what do we see? We see clearly a proof from Shlomo HaMelech that you're not allowed to mix two different simchas. Says the Gemara, maybe not. Maybe the reason Shlomo HaMelech didn't do both of them together because we're not going to delay in order to do them together. But maybe if it fell out, if it happened to have occurred, then we would say that. So maybe it's not a proof. The fact that Shlomo Melech didn't do them together because he didn't want to delay. He didn't want to delay the building of the Beis Hamikdash. Answers the Gemara, what do you mean? He could have left over a little bit, not finished the building of the Beis Hamikdash, finished it on Yontif or Erev Yontif, and then do the two celebrations together. Why did he have to finish it a week prior? Says the Gemara back, what? You're going to leave over the Beis Hamikdash? No way. You can't do that. Says the Gemara, and I'll bring you a raya to that. Shlomo Melech should have left over Ba'ama Kilya Oiriv. Should have left over the Amma of the crow chaser, literally, and he didn't do that. So what do we see clearly that Shlomo Melech was not able to leave over something? The Gemara counters back. Amma Kilya Oiriv, Tzarech Binyan Abayisu. What do you mean? That's part of the actual building itself. So he could not have done that. He could not have delayed and not completed the Beis Hamikdash, and he cannot have delayed and not completed the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore the fact that he completed it is not a proof that you're not allowed to mix two different simchas, because maybe it's because he haven't finished the Beis Hamikdash. Ella explains the Gemara, you know what the proof is? From the fact that the pasuk says extra words. Mechti Ksiv Arbasar Yoim. And this is probably how most people read the Gemara at first. It says 14 days. Shivas Yamim, Shivas Yamim, Lamali. Why did the pasuk? If you look back at the last narrow line, the pasuk Shivas Yamim, Shivas Yamim, Arbas or Yamim. That's very repetitive. Why did the pasuk do that? Shema Minas. You know what the proof the pasuk spelled out? 7 and 7. Ani L'chad. That's honing in to teach us this halacha. To teach us the halacha that you're not able to be ma'arev and mix two different simchas together. Continues the Gemara, Amar Rav Harnach, Amar Rav Yechlan, Oisa Shana Oisa Yisrael Yom Kippurim. That year, the year that Shlomo Melech dedicated and finished the Beis Hamikdash, Klal Yisrael did not have Yom Kippur. Why? Do the math. 7 days before Sukkot is Yom Kippur. So during Yom Kippur, they're busy celebrating the Chanukah Zabayis. Vayudayigim and Klal Yisrael was nervous. Vaymer, they were saying, Shema. Perhaps it's Chayvus Sanim Shaisal Kliya. Perhaps Klal Yisrael is deserving to be destroyed. Sanim Shal Yisrael, euphemistic term. Perhaps we're deserving to be destroyed. We didn't have a Yom Kippur. We didn't have a Kapara. Yatsa Baskal V'Amr Lahem, a heavenly voice emerged and said to them, Kolchem Ezumanim Nachayol Haba. You're all prepared and waiting to go straight to Olam Haba. Don't be nervous. Says the Gemara, my drush. Great, beautiful. So we know they're going to Olam Haba. We see that you don't mix two different simchas. We see there was no Yom Kippur. But ask the Gemara, how did they know? How did Klal Yisrael know to push off Yom Kippur and not push it off, but to not have Yom Kippur? What did they darsh it? So he explains the Gemara, Amru Kal V'Chaimer, they said a Kal V'Chaimer. Uma Mishkan Shein Kedusha Kedusha Olam. The Mishkan's sanctity Kedusha does not last forever. V'Kar Ben Yachid Doicha Shabbos. The Karban Yachid and the Karbana is brought by the inauguration of the Mishkan by each of the Nisiim was a Karban Yachid, was a private Karban, and yet it's Deicha Shabbos, the Isser Skila. And what is Shabbos? Isser Skila stoning. Mikdash, when it comes to building the Beis HaMikdash, Shlomo Melech, the Kedusha like Kedusha Olam. It's everlasting Kedusha. The Karban Sibar, and it's a public Karban. And Yom Kippurim is Dainish Karis, which is a lower level punishment. Lo Kol Shekein. Of course it's going to override Yom Kippur. So they learned that from the Mishkan. That just like the Mishkan was Deicha Shabbos, so too the Yom Kippur, the building of the Beis HaMikdash will be Deicha Yom Kippur. But says the Gemara, beautiful, and it's so beautiful. Elamai Deikin. So why were they nervous? If they had a Kal V'Chaimer, what are they nervous about? Answers the Gemara, over there by the Mishkan, the Karbanos were a Tzarech of Hashem, but over here by the dedication, by the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash, what was going on? It was a Tzarech Hadyet, meaning they were eating and drinking, they were rejoicing. So says the Gemara, you're right. So why do they eat? If they were so nervous, so they shouldn't have ate on Yom Kippur. They shouldn't have drank. And on that answers the Gemara, it's impossible not to eat and drink while rejoicing. You cannot rejoice, you cannot have an inauguration of the holiest temple of the house of God without eating and drinking. It says the Gemara, beautiful proof. And now let's go one step back. This all derived from the Mishkan. So now we have to ask, Mishkan to Dachi Shabbos, and how do we know the Mishkan itself is Dachi Shabbos? If you're going to tell me, because it says by the Mishkan, it says the first day and on the seventh day they brought the karbanos. Delma Shvi likarbanos. Maybe it means the seventh day of the karbanos they brought, but not necessarily the seventh day being Shabbos. There were 7 days, there were 12 days of karbanos. But how do you know that it means on Shabbos per se? On that answers Amar Nachbar Yizik Amar Kra b'Yom Ashtei Asar Yom. It says b'Yom on the 11th day. Ma Yom, just like a day is Kulei Ratz of the entire day is one entity. Excuse me, Av Ashtei Asar Yom. Ritzufin was continuous, therefore the Siyam brought every single day, and therefore they brought on Shabbos as well. Says Gemara, maybe maybe it just means they brought on days they were able to bring, but which means they did not bring on Shabbos. And that asks the Gemara, we have another pasuk. Ma Yom Kulei Ratzav Avshanim Yishem Asar Yom, Kula and Ritzufim. So we see it was in order. Says the Gemara, the same kasha. Maybe this pasuk also means the days you could bring the karbanos, not referring to Shabbos. Answers the Gemara, why do we need two different psukim? And therefore, from the extra pasuk, we learn out that the Mishkan is Deicha Shabbos, and by extension, we're learning out that the inauguration of the Beis HaMikdash, the Karban Sibur, only a kares is as well Deicha Yom Kippur. Ask the Gemara, Mikdash Deicha Yom Kippur Minalan. Where do we know that the Beis HaMikdash, was Deicha Yom Kippur? If you're going to tell me that it says 14 days they had the Chanukah's Beis HaMikdash, but the same question. Answers the Gemara, Gamar, Yom awesome. We learn it from over there. So just like the Mishkan is Deicha Shabbos, so too the Beis HaMikdash is Deicha Yom Kippur. And we continue the story that Yatza Baskov Armalam Kulcham Izmanu L'Chayolim Haba. Ask the Gemara, Minalan Da'achalo. How do we know that Hashem gave them a kapara? The Tani Tachliva b'Yom Hashmini Shalachas Am Veivarchus Hamelech on the 8th day. What happened? He sent out the people and they blessed the king. This is referring to by the end of Shlomo HaMelech's inauguration. And they went back home to their tents. Semeichem v'tuvei leiv. They were happy and glad of heart. This goes back to that Oyel refers to their wife. Al kol ha'tevish asa Hashem, and all the goodness Hashem did to them, the David Avdai, and to David his servant, Yisrael Amai, and to the entirety of Klal Yisrael. Lo yaleim, what does that refer to? Shalchu matu nishem b'tayra. They found their wives. Everyone went home after the Chanukah's Beis HaMikdash, and their wives were tar. Semeichem, why they rejoiced? Shanagu mizav Shechina, that they had benefit from the radiance of the Shechina. V'tuvei leiv, they were glad in heart. Shkol echad v'echad. Nis Abra Ishtay ben Zachar. Fascinating. They went home, their wives were tar, and boom, they all had a male child. I call Ateva and all the goodness she has a baskal of Amr Lahem. Kulcha mizumanim l'chayolam haba. And David Avdai, what does it refer to? At the end of the pasuk, it says, for David, my servant, Yisrael Amai. Bishlam Yisrael Amadachlu. I understand that what were Klal Yisrael, that they got a kabara, which is referring to what? Avay Yom Kippurim. And David Avdai, Ma'i, what's referring to David and my servant? Rav Yehuda, my Rav, Bishasha Bigi, Shlomo La'achles, Aron Mikdash, you know what happened? Shlomo HaMelech is bringing the Aron HaKodesh into the Beis HaMikdash. What an auspicious and incredible sight! Tavkush Arim Zelazeh, the gates closed, and they couldn't get into the Beis HaMikdash. Amar Shlomo gets up, Shlomo HaMelech is Esim Arba Rinais. He says 24 praises, but I knew he wasn't answered. Pasach v'Amar Yom Susharim Rashechem, my gates open up. But he wasn't answered. But then Kivin Shamar, what did Shlomo HaMelech say? Hashem Elikim al Toshev b'nei Meshichecha. Why should you not turn me away? Because Zachra lechaste David Avdecha. Remember David HaMelech, your servant. And immediately the gates opened up and he was able to bring in the Arayin. You know what happened at that moment? The enemies of David HaMelech's faces turned like the bottom of a pot. And they know that Hashem forgave David HaMelech for the fact that it was in his chos that the Sha'arim, the gates of the Beis HaMikdash, opened up and allowed Shlomo HaMelech to bring in the Arayin. Continues the Gemara, Rav Yehuda's son ben Asmai. We're about 12 lines at the bottom. The first word line is Asmai. Rav Yehuda ben Gerim Danu Parshas Nedarim. They were learning the Parsha, they were learning the dinim of Nedarim. Rav Shimon ben Yochai in the yeshiva of Shimon Yochai. Ifter minei ba'orta at night, they went home and they left the Rebbe. Let's out for in the morning, after they returned. But come ifteri minei, and what happened? They left again. Amr lahu, he said to them, Alav ifteru minei ba'orta, what are you doing? You just came back just to say goodbye? We said goodbye last night. Amr lahu, l'matenu rabbeinu Rashbi. You know, you taught us. Talmid shenifta mei rabbi v'lon b'y seir. If you leave your rabbi, but then you sleep over in the same town, sarich lifter minu b'anacharis, you got to leave him again. Shnam Rabbi Yom Hashini shalach hasam ve'varchu was hamelech, and they blessed the king. Uksiv yom esim rishon shel chodesh hashvi shalach hasam elam mikan. So why do we have two different psukim? Letalmid anifta mei rabbi v'lon b'y seir sarich lifter minu b'anacharis. You have to take leave of the Rebbe again if you slept over in the same town. Amar le lebrei. So it continues and actually concludes the story. Says the Gemara. So Rav Shimon bar Yochai said to his son, Beni Adam alalu anashim shel tzurahim. Shimon bar Yochai said that these people that took leave of me, Rav Yonasan ben Asmai, Rav Yehuda ben Gerim, they're incredible Talmidei Chachamim. And Rav Shimon bar Yochai tells his son, Zil gabayim delevarchuch. Go to them. Let them give you a bracha. So Hazel, the son of Rashbi, went. He found them that they were asking the following question. It says in one pasuk, Palas magala raglecha. You should weigh all your actions, and then you'll be established. Uksev, another pasuk says, you should just do, don't weigh. And as the second to last Rashi points out, Orachaim ben Tiflas sounds like every mitzvah you should just do, big or small, you shouldn't weigh it out. Whereas the other pasuk said, first calculate. Answers, as the previous Rashi also points that out, what we just said, answers the Gemara like Kashak mitzvah, such a fundamental answer. If the mitzvah can be done by someone else, then weigh it. What are you wasting your time? Let someone else do it. But if, as we turn over to Yudazim Beis, come in mitzvah, if no one else can do it, then you got to jump in and you got to do it right away. So Hadar Yosvi v'kam b'ayilei. So these two great Gedalim that Rashbi sent his son to, Rav Yonasan ben Asmai and Yehuda ben Gerim, he realizes that who is sitting here? The son of the Rebbe, the son of Rashbi. So they asked another shayla, Ksev Yikari b'nimim, Chol Chavasechel Yashuba. It says it's more desirous than pearls, and Chol Chavasechel Yashuba. Everything else can't compare. So what does it sound like? But it sounds like it says Chafatzecha. Your desires you cannot equate and compare to it. But it sounds like mitzvahs. Chavsei shamayim. You could compare to it. Uksev, what does the pasuk say? V'chol chavatim lo yeshvu ba. Davil chaz yishvayim lo yeshvu ba. So we have a contradiction. Do we weigh chavsei shamayim? Do we weigh mitzvahs? A very similar contradiction or not? Answers the Gemara. The same teretz. Kan be mitzvah, 6 lines from the top. Shev shel asayis l'deichem. Kan mitzvah shev shel asayis al yideichem. And that's going to be the fundamental difference. Whether you should do the mitzvah right away or whether you're allowed to weigh it out first. Continues the Gemara, Amru Lai. So after he learned two beautiful contradictions, Rashbi's son is sitting by these two Greek Gedalim and asking for a bracha because they. Rav Yonasan and Rav Yehuda asked him, Abba, Zalcha, what are you doing over here? Amr Lahu, he said, Amr Li Abba, my father told me, Zil Gabayo Zavarchach, I should go get a bracha from you. Amr Ulei, so you know they responded, listen to this fabulous quote-unquote bracha that Rav Yonasan and Rav Yehuda said to the son of Rishim bar Yochai. Yei Ravo, Tizrav, Eloi Techsad. It should be the will of Hashem, you should sow, but you're not going to reap. Ta'ayil, you should take in, v'lo tebak, not take out. Tebak you should take out, v'lo ta'ayil, not take in. L'charav beizcha, your house should be destroyed, v'leisav hashmizach, and your inn should be inhabited, u'lovilvel b'sayrach, your table should be disturbed, v'lo sechzi shasa chadata, and you're not going to see a new year. So sounds pretty bad. So Rashbi's son comes back home, and of course his father says, "What happened?" Says his son, "Not only did they not give me a bracha, they pained me, they cursed me, they said this dreadful thing to me." But Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said, "1 second, what did they tell you?" And he responded, this is what they said. So Amar Le, Rashbi said, really, these are all fabulous brachas. You just have to look a bit deeper. The wisdom and incredible chachma of Rashbi to be able to look at something that looks terrible and turn it into a bracha. And the Gemara now explains about 15 lines down. The first line is Tizra. Tizra v'lo techet said, what does the pasuk mean that says you should plant and you're not gonna harvest? You know what it means, says Rashbi. Toiled banim v'lo yamusu, you're gonna have children and they're not gonna die. Ta'ayav v'lo tapik. Then he continued and he said that you're going to take in, you're not going to take out. What does that mean? You're going to bring in a daughter-in-law for your son, and your son's not going to die, so they're going to stay living by you. That you should bring it out and not take in. What does that mean? The opposite. You're going to have a daughter, and they're going to go live with their husband, and their husband's not going to be nifta, so they're going to stay by them. Excuse me. And they're not going to come back to live by you. And then he continued, your house should be destroyed, and your inn should be inhabited. This world is the inn. The next world is the house. So therefore we see that the next world is where it's really out. And he continues, on the first wide line, what does it mean? Your table should be disturbed. Lots of children, a Levitic table, you have the kids everywhere. It's quite you look at a good Shabbos suit that looks disturbed, it looks crazy. No, it's beautiful. There's children, it's singing, it's Levitic. That's what the bracha was. It wasn't a curse. You should not see a new year. You know what that means? Lo tamas itcha. Your wife is not going to die. You're not going to have to marry another woman. So even though all these things sounded pretty bad, we see a wonderful translation by Rashbi. The Gemara continues a very similar story on the second white line of Shimon ben Chalafta iftar minei derav, when he left Rav Amar Le Zelagabe Dilvarchon. So Rav said to him, "Go and he'll give you a bracha." Amar Le, so Shimon Chalafta said, that you should not be embarrassed and you should not embarrass others. Also, Gabi Avu, he came back home. Amar Le, what did he tell you? Amar Le, Milin Ba'almud. Amar Le, he said just nonsensical things. I shouldn't be embarrassed and I shouldn't embarrass others. So Amar Le, so his father responded to him and said, "No, Barcha Berachasa, he gave you a beautiful Barcha de Berachin Kucha Berichu the blasa, the bracha." Excuse me. HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, the Yisrael Tiklal Yisrael V'tani Ba, T'chsev Achaltem Olchel V'Savei V'Alaltem. You're going to eat and you're going to be satisfied and you're going to praise. L'Yavoishu, you're not going to be embarrassed. Ami Lo'ilam forever. L'Daitem Ki B'Kerev Yisrael Ani, because I'm amongst your Klal Yisrael. L'Yavoishu Ami Lo'ilam, and I will not. And the people will not to be embarrassed. So it wasn't senseless matters. He gave you a beautiful bracha that you should never be embarrassed and you should not embarrass others. And now we go into the next part of the Mishnah, that the Mishnah said, that a woman is allowed to make her tachshitim, her endowments, makeup, as we'll see on Chol HaMoed. Explains the Gemara, what are the makeup, what are the endowments of a woman? She puts an eye makeup, she does her hair, and she put some coloring into her face. It meant that she passes a srak al paneh shalmata on her lower face, as Rashi says, that refers to Oisamakam, her private parts. And what this refers to is that she shaves, she takes off the hair from Oisamakam. Says the Gemara story, the wife of Rav Chisda was getting herself all dressed up, was putting on makeup in front of her daughter-in-law on Chalamayid. Yosef Ravuna Bar Chinna Kamed Rav Chisda, so Ravuna Bar Chinna was sitting before Rav Chisda, Yosef Kamer, and he was sitting and saying, Lo, Shanu Yalda. When do we say you can put on makeup? A young woman. Aval Zekena Lo, an old lady. What are you putting makeup on? Amar Le, Rav Chisda wasn't happy. Rav Chisda responded, Alakim, Lashon of Ashvua, Afilu Imach, even your mother, Vafilu Imedi Imach, your grandmother, even if someone is about to die. Tamri Inshi, why? Because people say, 60-year-old is like a 6-year-old, and they run to the sound of the bells. There's never an age. Makeup is always appropriate. We learn from this Gemara. Young or old is allowed to put on Chol HaMoed. We continue. Rav Yehuda Aimer Loitasud. Rav Yehuda said in the Mishnah, you're not allowed to put lime on the skin, which is a way of removing the hair. Tanya, we learned in the rice about 20 lines to the bottom of Testament base. First word on the line is Tanya. Rav Yehuda Aimer, Isha Loitasud, a woman's not allowed to put on lime. They should never lulux. It makes her disgusting right now. But Rav Yehuda Besiche Chol Kabla B'Moed. Rav Yehuda admits that you're allowed to peel off certain types of sin on Chol HaMoed, Shetayfeles. She could use it on Moed. Why? Even though it causes her tsar when it's on her, it's going to cause her beautiful. So only thing you can't put on that you're not going to see the results. But if you're putting on a type of makeup, a type of hair removal that right now it's gross, but it's going to be beautiful, that is allowed as well. But ask the Gemara, Misli Rav Yehuda, as far does Rav Yehuda really say this? V'atanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Rav Yehuda in the front. Rav Yehuda says you're allowed to accept a payment from a guy on the day of his holiday. Why? Because it causes him distress. Amrullah, the Chacham said to Rav Yehuda, right now they're upset, but they're going to be happy. So Chacham said you're not allowed to accept a payment on the day of their holidays, a guyish holiday, because the guy is going to go think they're by desire, even though right now they're in pain. But eventually it's going to give them something to be of joyful. So what do you see? See, Rav Yehuda doesn't hold to this idea that you're in pain right now, but it's going to bear fruit, then it's allowed. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak explains Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak Hanach Leilchas Moed the Kula Meitzer Achshav Semech Lachar Zman. Don't ask me about Hilchas Chol HaMoed. It's a special din of Chol HaMoed that what you're allowed to do things that now cause you pain, but will eventually cause you to rejoice. That's why Rav Yehuda does Meikol, but it's a special din of Chol HaMoed, and therefore don't equate it to other areas of halacha. Don't ask me from Goyim, etc. Ravina Amar Kuti Lini Pirayin Loila Meitzer. It's referring to a Kuti who always gets distressed. He never is happy, even after some time. Amar Rav Yehuda, once we're on the topic of a woman removing hair, when they become mature, they don't become mature, they start having hair, but they're not of age yet, so it doesn't look nice. Aniya is type of the poor woman remove it with lime. Ashir is type of with flour. But nice melachim b'shemen amar shenemer, as we saw in Megillah last Masechta. She Esther Amalka, she Chadash b'Shemen Amar. My Shemen Amar, Rav Yehuda Bar Chiya Amar, Sateches refers to a certain type of oil, referred to as Sateches. And Rav Yirmiyah Bar Ami, he explains this Shemen Zayis Levi Tlish. It's olives that did not fully mature, and these were the olives that they used to soak their skin in to remove the hair. Tanya Rav Yehuda Aimer on Pik Kinoin says Rav Yehuda Shemen Zayis, this certain type of Shemen Zayis is Shleivi Shlish, that's referring to. I said, why do they anoint with it? Shamash as the Sarah removes the hair, Madinas Abazar, and it makes the skin beautiful. Rav Bibi Avale Brata Tifla Iver. Rav Bibi had a daughter, and he would apply the apply the lime to her, one limb at a time. And then she became so beautiful. Shakal Baldada Mea Zuzi, she got 400 zuz. She was a beautiful girl because he tended to her properly. But then Kusi B'Shavusi, there was a certain Kusi. Tavle Brat, he also had a daughter. So he said, wait, if Rav Bibi put lime on limb by limb, I'll do better. Tavle B'Chad Zinna covered his daughter's whole body with lime, and you know what happened? Umesa, and she died. Amar, and this Kuti said, Katla, Bibi Lebrate, Bibi murdered my daughter. Amar Rav Nachman, Rabibi Dishasi Shechra, Rabibi who drinks beer. Bayin Benase, Tavla. His house is always beer over there, so his daughters could handle it. They're tougher. They could put lime on. But Anan, Loshadina, Shechra, Labina, Benase, Tifla, we cannot use this lime because they can't handle it because they don't drink beer. We'll pick it up tomorrow. Share discussing the head yet, how you could sew in Cholamoid, etc.